thank you for coming this morning at our tail end of summer and whatever you want to call this 90-degree weather we've been having. Today we're going to talk about managing blood sugar and how to lose weight in a natural way. My name is Marty Donovan. I own the Natural Wellness Corner. I'm a clinical nutritionist, herbalist, and pharmacist. And my passion is for people to have balanced bodies. We have a very drugged society, unfortunately, and that doesn't solve anything. It merely holds things in place. And when we talk about diabetes, it doesn't hold you in place. It just slows the decline that is almost assured with chronic diabetes care. I hate to be that blunt, but I've seen it. I owned a drugstore for 37 years, and I've just seen it over and over and over again. More and more drugs, more and more problems, and they're not getting to the bottom line. So anyway, so that's what we're going to do today. Let me put on my eyes. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? First, we'll talk about the basics of blood sugar, just kind of definitions. What is it? What's going on? Talk about weight gain. What is blood sugar and what is insulin? We'll talk a lot about insulin. Insulin is not really talked a lot about with type 2 diabetics. It's more type 1 diabetics they talk about that with, those that can't make their own insulin. How do these things get out of balance, blood sugar and blood insulin? And what role does body weight play? And it's a huge role. We'll get into that. So why is this important? There can be both short-term and long-term effects. There's risks and complications. We'll talk extensively about metabolic syndrome. What medications are they currently using for diabetes? And then how can you do this naturally? We'll talk about sustainable lifestyle habits. We'll talk about balanced eating and food timing and exercise, and all these are really critical. So let's get into the body of this, the basics of blood sugar and weight gain. So what exactly is blood sugar? Blood sugar, you can interchange the term glucose for that. That's the amount of glucose or sugar in your blood at any time. And you can check at any time. There's always blood sugar there. It has to be there for you to be alive. Your blood sugar levels will change regularly throughout the day. It rises and falls in response to eating and then managing that. So this is a typical pattern. You start with a fasting of 6 a.m. It's around 80. You eat. A little while later, hour later, you're up around 120, and then slowly it'll go back down to baseline, and then you have your next meal and it goes up. So it's meant to be that way. The sugar is there to fuel your body, give you energy and things like that, but you don't want it there all the time. And we'll talk about why the problem of having it there all the time when we get into that. So what levels are considered to be normal? Normal range would be considered 70 to 100. Lower than that is called hypoglycemia. That's low blood sugar, and that can be life-threatening. More threatening than high blood sugar when we get into that. I mean, in the short term, in terms of instant death from low blood sugar, that can happen. So again, fasting blood sugar is considered to be 12 hours. If you're going to have a 6 a.m. blood sugar, you cannot eat after 6 p.m. So normal is 70 to 100. The beginning risk category is 101 to 125. They also call that pre-diabetes at some level. And then you get into the 126 plus, and that's the true clinical definition of being in the diabetes range. There's another measure besides blood sugar in your blood, and it's called hemoglobin A1C. And this is a measure of a 3-month average of your blood sugar. So where your blood sugar will go up and down all day long, this will give you like a blood sugar for every moment for 3 months. So it gives you may say, gee, I get up in the morning and I'm only 110, but my doctor says my hemoglobin A1C, I'm at 160. That's because you are up there some other time. You're just not measuring it at the right time. So this gives you a good overall indicator of where you are. And these line up with the normal, the 70 to 100, you'd be at the 5.7 or lower. If you're in the 110 category, you're going to be 5.7 to 6.5, and if you're diabetic, you're above 6.5. You may have seen on TV some of the diabetes drugs that they advertise incessantly, and they say, oh, our markers, if you get below 7, you're going to be great. Well, no, that's really bad, but that's their goal with medication, is to get below 7. So let's talk about insulin. Again, a hormone not talked a lot about. Insulin is a hormone made by your body, by your pancreas. Whenever you eat sugar, glucose rises in your bloodstream. Your brain triggers your pancreas to release insulin to manage your blood sugar. So what insulin does is it allows the sugar to leave your bloodstream and be taken up by your cell. There, it's either stored away as energy or burned up stored away as fat or burned up as energy. We want it to burn as energy. We don't want to store away fat. But those are the roles of how does your insulin regulate how much sugar is in your bloodstream. So the way insulin works is like a lock and a key. You have your key to your house. You take your key, you put it in the door, you unlock it, and then you're allowed to walk into your house. Insulin does the same thing. You have what are called receptor sites. That's the lock. Insulin would be a key. And glucose would be wanting to walk in the door. So the insulin comes down, plugs into the cell. This image over here. Oops, wrong one. This image over here. The insulin comes down, plugs in to the cell. That then allows the glucose to go into the glucose channel, which is over here. So that's walking in the door. This is a vital role for regulate how does your blood sugar get in balance. And this balance of blood sugar and insulin in your cells is really critical for life. If you were not in balance, you would not be alive very long after that. Sugar in your blood supports your brain, your heart, your muscles. You want to think of it as a food source. And that also in your cells is supporting energy and cellular function. So that is basically the food for your brain, heart, muscles, energy, etc. So insulin provides this important life-saving issue, and the balance should not allow the blood sugar to go too high. So how do blood sugar and insulin work together? This is kind of just a pictorial of what goes on. You eat your food, goes into your stomach. The food gets turned into glucose in your stomach. It then goes into your bloodstream. So you have over here, you have the red is the blood vessel. The glucose is going into your blood vessel. The pancreas then, the green image, then releases the insulin, goes into your bloodstream as well. So now you have both the glucose and insulin in your blood. Then the blood and insulin are being carried throughout your body because you need energy everywhere. Then the insulin opens up the cell, and then the cell absorbs the glucose. And here's just a little kind of animation. That petal is supposed to be insulin. It plugs into the cell, the receptor site, and then the white blob, the sugar, is allowed to pass into the cell. So if this is so important, how do they get out of balance? Well, as I mentioned before, blood sugars vary throughout the day. You eat food, it goes up, and then it comes down. Insulin is meant to vary as well. It goes up in response to eating and goes down. Abnormal levels or unnatural levels can sometimes either be kind of an acute or immediate cause, temporary cause, or there can be a chronic or long-term cause for that being out of balance. More the immediate could be something like dehydration. It could be you're under some kind of illness or injury, or you've had medications. And for instance, steroids, prednisone, they will raise your blood sugar dramatically. Chronic would be more long-term problems. These would be things like insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes. We'll explain those thoroughly in a minute. And then there's other chronic conditions like type 1 diabetes, cystic fibrosis, Cushing's disease, and polycystic ovarian syndrome. So all these can result in insulin and blood sugar being out of balance with each other with long-term health complications. So today's topic is we're going to talk about insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and especially their relationship to body weight. Okay, so here again, a little more information about insulin resistance. So with insulin resistance, I'll give you that one first. Your body's producing more and more insulin to try to keep your blood sugar in check. What happens is that when you are approaching the imbalance in blood sugar, your body is having to make more and more insulin to get the same effect. Insulin resistance means it's not responding. The insulin is not working the way it should. It'd be kind of like having a key with a piece removed from the thing, so it doesn't fit the lock exactly. So you have to create more and more insulin to get the exact same effect. And the other complication then can be that over time, as you produce more and more insulin, the pancreas begins to wear out, and then it can't make enough insulin. And some type 2 diabetics, which is actually an excessive insulin level, chronic excessive insulin level, eventually you go into type 1 diabetes type, which means you have to have insulin because you can't make it anymore. Your gland no longer works. So again, the process here in a little image, it shows at the bottom you're eating, then the glucose starts to rise, your insulin then also rises up. What's supposed to happen then is over time they both go down. With insulin resistance, the insulin never goes back to where it should. The glucose then eventually breaks through and stops rising. Now, in my opinion, doctors unfortunately don't measure insulin in the bloodstream, and it doesn't make any sense to me. Why? Because that's the foundation of this disease. So they should be, anytime they check your glucose, they should be checking your insulin. Most type 2 diabetics, you can diagnose them with onset coming diabetes 10 years before it shows up. Eventually, you just can't make enough insulin to hold your sugar down. So looking at sugar control as the goal in spite of insulin. So insulin can rise and rise and rise, and glucose eventually will start to rise too because it can't stay down anymore. So now you end up with a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, but you could have been taking care of this a long time ago if you had known that this was coming. Okay, so how does this balance get out of balance? Some of the things that can happen are being overweight or obese. They also call that diabesity. Again, the direct connection between diabetes and obesity. So excessive weight, especially in the abdomen, like on the belly, can cause fat to leak into your organs and muscles, which are pro-inflammatory, and these can then create insulin resistance. So body fat promotes insulin resistance. So obesity triggers inflammation, which then increases your blood sugar. Diet is a huge deal as well. Obviously, the long-term negative of imbalanced eating is obesity or being overweight. But in the meantime, the excessive carbs, things like high saturated fats, low whole foods, these all increase the risk of gaining weight and getting you out of balance. Exercise is a huge piece when it comes to control. Exercise improves insulin sensitivity, and it also allows glucose to move out of your bloodstream and into your cells without insulin being present. So it's like a natural insulin action without causing you to provoke the release of insulin. So exercise is really a very, very, very big piece of this. Okay, so here's again a little graphic. You've got these conditions. You've got being overweight, you're not exercising, you're eating the wrong way. You end up with insulin resistance. When you have insulin resistance, it's like you're starving with a full refrigerator. You've got all this energy, but your body's not recognizing that it's there. So when you have insulin resistance, essentially your body thinks you're not being fed, and therefore it will cause your own body to make more sugar. One of the life-saving factors of your liver is when you're low in blood sugar, and I mentioned hypoglycemia as being a life-threatening thing, your liver saves your life. It makes sugar for you from the inside. Then in addition, with the increased fat, you have inflammation from the fat. You have, the insulin resistance, and then the pancreas begins to malfunction, as we talked about. Then you get the drop in insulin because you can't physically make it. So the result is increased blood sugar over a long, long period of time and low blood insulin. Okay, here are 3 different images that look kind of the same. This is the US, and the dark blues are high incidence and the light colors are low incidence. And as you can see, one is diabetes, one is obesity, and one is physical activity. And they are mirror images of each other. So these go hand in hand, and it's really the obesity and inactivity that are driving the diabetes. So this is how important lifestyle is with this condition, both weight, being overweight, and needing to get your blood sugar under control. So with the high blood sugar, this is the progression. You're not eating properly, you're overweight, you're not exercising. These are the triggering factors. You then now develop, as a result of that, you develop insulin resistance prior to your doctor's diagnosis of diabetes. Again, 10 years possibly prior. You now have high insulin in your bloodstream, but you have normal blood sugar, and your doctor's happy. You're good. You got normal blood sugar, no problem at all, but they don't know anything about the insulin levels. Eventually, the insulin can't keep up. Blood sugar starts to rise. You need more and more insulin to get the same effect. Now you're classified as the pre-diabetes. Now you're on their radar, but usually they don't medicate pre-diabetes. They won't do that until you get to full diabetes. That's when they start drugs like metformin. Now you're diagnosed with higher blood sugar in the diabetes range, and over time then your insulin unfortunately can then stop being available to give you full effect. So why are normal blood sugar, and why are our healthy weight so important? What's the big deal in terms of our health? Well, there's some short-term effects. With diabetes, you can have blurred vision, excessive thirst, frequent urination, fatigue, headaches. These are things that you come into the doctor and say, look, doctor, I've got excessive thirst, I've got frequent urination. They're going to say, okay, they're looking at those symptoms saying, this is you. You're probably, we'll test you, you're probably in the diabetes or pre-diabetes range. And then obesity, some symptoms of that are excessive sweating, fatigue, difficulty sleeping, shortness of breath, snoring, limited mobility, and I'll add into that GERD. Reflux is common with obesity. So the result of insulin resistance is metabolic syndrome. Now, this is another reason why monitoring insulin is so important, because with insulin resistance, the long-term effects are eventually high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and high blood sugar. Now, they may start differently with different people. One person may start with hypertension. Okay, they put me on lisinopril. I'm on a blood pressure drug. But the problem was insulin. Or now I've got high cholesterol. They're going to put me on a statin. No, but the problem was insulin. Or then I break through with sugar. Or you may have sugar first and then the others. So it's individual by your own body. But the net result is that three-legged stool. You don't have to. If you see a type 2 diabetic who's been a type 2 diabetic for a long time, you don't have to say, are you on a blood pressure medicine or are you on a statin? Which one are you on? Because they will all be on it. So the results of that are, certainly you have the visceral obesity, which is dramatically increases risk of heart disease, things like that. The high blood pressure, again, the insulin resistance, high triglycerides, which is and low good cholesterol. There's the cholesterol imbalance. And then there's the cardiovascular disease. You have a 2.5 to 3 times higher risk of death from cardiovascular disease when you're in metabolic syndrome. So what are the long-term risks of obesity? You've got increased risk of all-cause mortality. That means death from any reason. When you're obese, you have a higher risk of death from any reason. Higher risk of certainly arthritis and replacement, the weight on your joints, especially like the knees and hips. It wears away the cartilage and can't replace itself quickly. Kidney, liver, gallbladder disease, many types of cancer. Sugar feeds cancer. Heart disease, stroke, dementia, pain, low quality of life, mental health disorders. So there's the mental impact of dealing with being overweight, things like that. And then the long-term complications to high blood sugar. You got diabetic nephropathy, which means your kidney is damaged, and eventually some end up with dialysis or replacement. There's the neuropathy, diabetic neuropathy, which is nerve damage, and that's, you may say, gee, my feet feel like they're wooden, or I've got severe burning in my feet or toes. That's the diabetic neuropathy. Very, very common with high insulin and high blood sugar. That just damage. It's like putting a nail in water and watching it rust. That's what happens with diabetic neuropathy. Diabetic retinopathy, which means any microcirculation area with diabetes is compromised. So eye health is really a very big deal. Cardiovascular disease, same thing. These small vessels in your arteries, in your heart are having a problem. Same in your brain, and stroke is being a possibility. Then some of the results: hypertension, skin and mouth infections. Glucose feeds yeast. And so it is very, very common to have both mouth yeast like thrush, or any crease in your body might get yeast in it from that. Or if you have other skin conditions like eczema or psoriasis, they're especially going to be filled up with yeast because of the sugar that's there to feed them. The diabetic foot ulcers, again, microcirculation in the feet is going down, and there's no way to heal that. Amputation, which can be the result of that situation. And then the vision loss and blindness, again, part of the retinopathy problem. So these are not minor things, and that's the problem with type 1 diabetes. It's like it's wearing you away. Bit by bit, you're whittling away at your vitality and your health and your independence. So there are meds that they're using for prescriptions. None of them get to the root of the problem. But if blood sugar is uncontrolled, then usually meds are used. Usually it's once you're truly in the 130 or so and above, they begin using some drugs. And then unfortunately, the pattern is that once you're on the med, you're going to be on another one, you're going to be on another one. One guy came to me, he was on 3 meds, and the doctor was adding either going to add a fourth one or he was going to double the dose of the third one. And his blood sugar was above 200 on all those. And after 3 months with me, he was off all his meds and his blood sugar was 120. So this is not a long-term, yes, compliance is important, but it's not you don't have to wait a long time to see results with this. So what are some of the meds that are used? A very common one, this used to be first line, like way back when I got out of pharmacy school, but now they have others. But glipizide is a drug that causes your pancreas to make more insulin. What do you think the problem with that is? We have too much insulin in the first place. What that does is it gives you more insulin to keep your blood sugar in control. But in the meantime, you're wearing away your pancreas even faster. So they still use this drug. You have a question? No? Okay. Inhibiting the liver from making glucose. Januvia is one of those. So I mentioned before, the liver can be turned on to release glucose, and Januvia inhibits that. Blocking stomach enzymes that allow you to absorb your carbohydrates. So essentially, you're not getting nutrition when you do that. And by the way, the blocking the liver from making glucose, that's a life-saving event. Your body is reacting, and now you're saying, no, I don't want you to do that. So it's really not a good choice. Improving the sensitivity of cells to insulin. Metformin is probably the first line they use for diabetes management, and that is a good concept. However, there's a natural supplement called berberine that does this equally as well as metformin in clinical trials. Metformin causes diabetic neuropathy. So what's wrong with that picture? Yes, you're controlling insulin, but you're damaging your body. And then inhibiting the reabsorption of glucose in the kidneys. When we have glucose in our urine, the body doesn't want it there because it's harmful and it will absorb it back into the bloodstream. Well, Jardiance prevents that from happening. So as a result of that, you can get bladder infections and all kinds of other problems because you're now dumping way back. Again, when I was in pharmacy school back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, they used to use urine strips to measure your sugar in your blood, and they didn't have the blood testing. They used to measure your urine sugar as a sign of how bad is your diabetes, that type of thing. So, and unfortunately, despite using all these, as I just mentioned with this man, no control and just continuing to go out of control. So it really is a progressively worsening, not a lot of hope from a medical perspective, in my opinion. And then certainly a lot of diabetics don't want to be on medications, but they don't know what else to do. So they end up being on them they don't know about options, about what can be done. And then certainly there's legitimate reasons for not wanting to be on them because the side effects that they cause. So some of those side effects are low blood sugar. Obviously they can bring you down too far. And again, that can be life-threatening. Headaches, rashes, dizziness, anxiety, cough. The lisinopril in particular is one that can cause that in terms of blood pressure, because these people are on those as well. Dry mouth, B12 deficiency, that's the metformin. That's why it causes neuropathy. Sugar in your urine, neuropathy, nerve pain, and many others. So it's not a really great set of options there. So meds don't really need to be used, in my opinion. Approximately 61% of type 2 diabetics are capable of managing their blood sugar through diet, lifestyle changes, and exercise alone. In my opinion, they're never given that option. They're not impressed with the doctors telling them what you can do. The guy that I mentioned who was on all these meds already, I asked him, and we'll talk about this later, but I asked him to measure his blood sugar before he exercised, do a 30-minute, and he did a 30-minute pretty intense exercise every day, and then check it as soon as you're done. His blood sugar was 210 when he started and 160 when he stopped. So in 30 minutes, he dropped his blood sugar 50 points. That's what exercise does. He goes, if I had known that, I would have done this 10 years ago. The doctor never told him about that. He said, yeah, exercise, but what's the impact of it? And you can measure it yourself. So for many, the natural way would be more preferable, obviously, due to side effects, and then certainly the nutrient depletions that the medicines can cause. Prediabetes can be reversed, and type 2 diabetes can be reversed, in my opinion. It is not a 100%. There are complicating factors, as I mentioned. There can be other factors involved, but in general, the lifestyle factors can do, even if you have other complicating factors, there can be a huge level of management achieved, maybe being on less meds or something like that, if you do the natural approach. So how do we manage blood sugar and weight? Let's talk about diet, first of all. This is critical. Obviously, your blood sugar can't go up unless you eat. So anytime you eat, you have to manage what happens with that. The method I recommend does not involve counting carbs and calories. The plate you see, it has, again, it's divided into sections. So the protein would be about 30 to 40% of your calories. The plate shows 25. It doesn't have to be precise. Generally, about the size of a palm of your own hand of protein per meal. For a woman, that may be 4 ounces. For a man, it may be 6 ounces. But that's a good level of protein to have with your meal. The carbohydrates, about 40 to 50% of your calories come from that. In this case, you can see the fruits and vegetables and the fiber-rich carbohydrates. So there's a blend. The goal here would be you'd have more of the green side than of the yellow side, because the high glycemic foods like rice, potato, pastas, those are going to raise your blood sugar very quickly, and you don't want to do that. So you want to make sure you're getting at least half of your plate, and you can use fist sizes. So say 2 or 3 fists of vegetables and maybe a half a fist of carbohydrates, like a half a cup of rice, a half a potato, that kind of thing. The fat, in terms of the remainder of the protein or the remainder of the calories, would be approximately 30 to 20% of that. And then again, there's a little more description about how you divide up your plate. Now, the importance of that is that protein, you want to think of protein as a carb regulator. It'll slow down the rate at which carbohydrates enter your bloodstream. So protein will help you feel satisfied. It helps reduce your hunger. It lasts longer. If you think about having a bowl of cereal in the morning or having, say, eggs and maybe a spring omelet, which one lasts you longer? Usually the cereal, an hour or 2 hours later, okay, what am I going to eat? With the omelet, I can wait till lunch. That's because you're getting a slow, steady usage of that. So the carbs are broken down very quickly and turned into glucose, and protein and fat are not. So they will slow down the rate at which it's going. So having adequate levels allows this balance. So here you have in the yellow, this would be a high carb breakfast. I had a bagel, I had some fruit, I had a sweet yogurt, I had a donut, something like that. The yellow, it rises fast and high. And what happens then is your body responds and makes insulin. So in this case, with the yellow case, you could put 5 eyes there for insulin. The body's looking, wow, this blood sugar's climbed, this is a huge meal. And it sends out a whole ton of insulin, but it wasn't a big meal. It was just quickly burned. As a result of that, then usually you drop down below fasting level, and that's the craving, irritation, fatigue, those kinds of things, because you're now in hypoglycemia. When you balance your carb and protein like the plate I just mentioned, you can see in green, things rise slowly, not high. You release a little insulin enough to manage it and burn your food as fuel. And when you go high, like the yellow line, and come down, you just stored away a lot of that. You didn't need all that energy at the moment, so your body dumped it into your body fat. And the other issue is that you need protein to fuel your muscles. This is protein. You didn't need any protein with the yellow line. The body will take this as your protein for that particular meal. That's why you get muscle wasting with type 2 diabetes, and the typical body shape is an apple. Little arms, little legs, and a big belly. And that's the typical pattern with type 2 diabetes, because they've wasted their butt, they've wasted their thighs and their arms with that. So by eating protein, you're now fueling your muscle, and you're then slowing down the rate at which, and you're not storing body fat. So with this mode, your body will feel free to release fat in between meals to allow you to lose weight. So the quality of your food matters. The thing you need to remember is that food is software. You hear about, green tea is so healthy for you, and grapes are so healthy for you, and all these different things. It's part of your genetic structure to be stimulated by what comes into the body. So when you eat healthy things like tomatoes with lycopene, and you're eating, the green tea and all that kind of stuff, it is turning on the component of your genes that are healthy for you for long life. When you eat garbage, your body's saying, okay, it's time to die. and you're now, oh, I'm creating cancer, I'm doing all these different things. So we want to turn on the good things and not turn on the bad things. So think of software and when you're eating your food. And when you eat a good food, it's doubly good for you. Not only did you eat something that's good for you, you didn't eat something that's bad for you. And same thing with bad. You could have eaten something good and you didn't. So you're getting no nutrients and you're causing harm to yourself. So non-starchy vegetables, these are lower in carbs and calories, so those are good ones to focus on. They provide vitamins, minerals, fiber. Again, these are those valuable things that promote healthy genetic response in your body. They promote satiety. You feel satisfied better. They aid in blood sugar management. They support your overall health. So some examples are the green leafy vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, peppers, cucumbers, onions, sprouts. So those should be a major portion of your daily eating. If you wanted to do a little more of your own research, if you're not familiar with the glycemic index, this is a rate of how fast does a food raise your blood sugar. So if you were to Google what are low glycemic vegetables and fruits, you'll see things like this. And those should be some of the mainstay of your daily eating. High glycemic would be potatoes, pastas, breads, cookies, that kind of stuff. So fruits, they generally fall more in the moderate glycemic. These are high in carbs and fiber, and they should be eaten whole. You're getting the fiber that's in there. You drink a juice. If you drink a glass of orange juice, you've probably eaten 7 oranges worth of oranges. But you want the fiber, again, to slow down the way you absorb. Fiber is a big friend to diabetes management. But so you end up with juices or you end up with dried fruits. These are concentrated sugar sources, and you don't want to do that. The starches, again, you want to moderate them. These are high in carbs. They're okay to have in moderation. If you focus on the ones that are higher in fiber, then these are things like legumes, lentils, quinoa, wild rice, farro. So there's a variety of starches that are friendlier than others. The stripped ones, the minute rice, the quick oats, those kinds of things, you don't want to have those because they don't have the things that would normally slow down the rate at which the carbs enter your bloodstream. The proteins and fats, so what kind of choices do you have there? It's best to focus on the leaner proteins. Things like fish, again, high in omega-3s, chicken and turkey and eggs. If it's possible to eat organic and free range, it is a much better option for you to have. It's a little more expensive, but with what I'm recommending, you'll eat less food, so you could put a little more into your budget for eating good quality proteins, things like that. So if you can do free range, the difference between a grocery store steak, let's just say, and a free range steak is that cow in the grocery store ate corn. They're being fattened up. They're given hormones and steroids and antibiotics to get them to market fast, fatten them up fast, and they're really bad for you. They're high in inflammatory fats, low in omega-3s. A cow that's eating grass, and buffalo is high in omega-3s, lower in the bad fats. So it's not getting all the garbage, all the factory farming that goes on. So it really is a much better choice. And then focus on the healthy fats. Fats are good for you. A lot of people trying to lose weight want to go fat-free, and that is the worst thing you can possibly do. You need healthy fats. For instance, they did a study with 2 different groups of people, and the only difference was one group, they gave a certain level of olive oil every single day, like an ounce of olive oil, and the olive oil group lost weight, and the other group didn't. So these fats, they turn on the good things in us that promote health to our bodies, our brain, our heart, all these different complications that occur with diabetes, heart disease. The healthy fats help to fight that. So avocados, fatty fish, flax, chia, olive oil, nuts and seeds are all good ways of getting that. What you do want to limit is, again, the beef and pork if they're grocery store, if they're the corn-fed, if they're from a good farm, then that's not as big of a deal. The fried foods with the bad fats. Saturated fats in moderation, again, cheese would be part of that. You don't have to eliminate it, but moderation, butter as well, and sweetened yogurts. The bigger deal with sweetened yogurt is the amount of carbs in there. Greek yogurts are a good choice because they're more a good carb-protein balance, very similar to the plate I showed, but sweetened yogurts might have 5 grams of protein and like 20 grams of carbs, so they're way out of balance. Okay, intermittent fasting. Has anybody here ever done fasting? There's 2, okay, 3. Now all raise your hand, please, because you've all fasted. That's what breakfast is, okay? We eat dinner, 6, we come in and we have breakfast at 6. That's a 12-hour fast. So intermittent fasting is not a villain. It's not something to be panicked about. It's a choosing not to eat. It's not starvation. Intermittent fasting means you're merely choosing the amount of time between your last meal. So one option would be I have dinner at 6. Instead of having breakfast at 6, I have lunch at noon. That's an 18-hour fast. And if you do fine with that, that's my pattern, by the way. If you do fine with that, then maybe once in a while try skipping lunch and go to dinner only. That's a 24-hour fast. Or you can go in between. Instead of doing from 12 to 18, you could go to 14 or 15. Just eat your dinner, your breakfast a little bit later. It's funny that everyone I talk to panics about this. It's like we're taking away your food and you're going to die. And after doing this for a month, they say, this is fantastic. I cannot believe how easy this is. It really keeps you from being a slave to your plate and from the clock. Oh, it's noon. I've got to have something to eat. Why? Are you hungry? No, but it's noon. I've got to have something to eat. So we get into these patterns. Maybe I think school started that. You go into these rhythms where you're regimented like a prison and you're eating things at a certain time. So it trains you the wrong way going forward. So intermittent fasting is really, I think, one of the keys for good long-term blood sugar control and weight loss. This will break any plateau you run into. If you're, I'm losing weight, now I'm not. Try fasting for 2 days and see what happens, and then go back to eating again. So the longest I've gone is 5 days. And you hear about Jesus fasting 40 days in the wilderness. There are people who go fast 40 days. You can do that. The longest one on record, guy was medically monitored in England. He went 400 days with vitamins and water. And the doctor monitored him the whole time. And he lost like 250 pounds. And he maintained that weight loss long term. So this is a long-term medically monitored. So we have the wrong idea about our life being in danger when we don't eat. Now, I'm not saying I would recommend that, but that is the record. Yes? Well, well, I've done it myself. When I fasted 5 days, my blood sugar was 70, which is fine. What you're doing is your body's burning fat as fuel, and fat is different. We're designed that we can live on both sugar and on fat. That's the keto diet. The keto diet, you're burning what's called ketones, which are, as fat breaks down, it makes these ketone bodies, and they're like little fat fuels. Little energy fuels. So you can do that. I don't recommend the keto diet long term. If somebody has certain medical issues going on, then it's a great diet, but it's temporary. It's not long term. What I'm recommending with this, where I mentioned the plate, that's a lifestyle. That's permanent. This is not, I'll do this until I've lost my weight and go back to what I was doing. Then you're going to go back to where you were. And you see that all the time. You see, that
plate works.
Yeah. Yep. You have to find a way to make this where you want to be. You have to make up your mind. What variety of food do you want to have? What timing is good for you? It's your own life and all that. And how do you integrate exercise? Because it's not just not eat. You have to exercise as well. There's lots involved with healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, see, that's why I'm overweight, but I don't have any sugar problems because I walk a lot.
You should ask the doctor to check your insulin.
He has.
Good.
So that's what he said. Obviously, you're walking, swimming.
Good.
biking,
Okay.
like that,
Yep.
But you can still be fat.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you can lose it though. You're not stubborn there. That can be accomplished. So anyway, but she's right. Generally, what people report when they regularly intermittent fast is they have more energy. Foggy thinking will often clear up. Skin begins to tighten up. When you fast, your body will begin to take itself apart, and these are the dead cells. We all cells are living and dying all the time, and you got all this debris that needs to be cleaned up. So when your body is in fasting mode, it's going after that stuff to help. It nourishes you as well. And so those are just some of the short-term things. So I highly encourage intermittent fasting. Some of the benefits are that, again, it improves insulin sensitivity, you're not eating food, you're not releasing sugar, you're not releasing insulin. They just go hand in hand. So it will help. The less time you have glucose in there, the less insulin resistance you're going to have. Again, it'll reduce overall blood glucose. One of the big deals is for someone with hemoglobin A1C, you're measuring your blood sugar over 3 months. So it's like every moment for 3 months. Well, if you just eat 2 meals a day, that's 365 meals less you've eaten in 1 year. Your blood sugar will go down and your hemoglobin A1C will go down. It cannot not go down. Again, it leads to more balanced insulin response, so the insulin now becomes more sensitive. It's able to work better with less, so you get less amount of it being reduced. Again, your overall calorie intake has been reduced just by not eating as much, and then your body will look for fat to burn, and therefore, over time, weight loss becomes a side effect of eating in the right way. Weight gain is a side effect of eating in the wrong way. So very logical and very true. Again, there are also hormones that regulate our hunger. This helps to put those into balance. And then it is important that someone who is on diabetes medication do not do this without medical advice, because you can drive you into low blood sugar. The goal is to get your sugar to drop so you can get off the meds. But you don't want to do that on your own. You want to make sure you work with someone, because again, that can be life-threatening. So having guidance about that. So some additional things about diet. The protein balance needs to be every time you eat. It's not just, I'll eat all my protein at dinner, I'll have all my carbs for breakfast, or I'll have a balanced breakfast and then I'll have a bag of chips between meals. You want to have the protein and carb every single time you eat, whether it's a meal or a snack. So some examples of a snack would be you have an apple and cheese. You're getting your carbs and you're getting your proteins. The Greek yogurt, again, is a good one. Nuts and seeds are balanced all by themselves. So a couple tablespoons of any nut or seed is a great way to go. I don't encourage peanuts. They're not a nut. They're a legume, and they're just different. So I wouldn't go with peanuts. The other is important that I gave you a balanced plate. What you drink also matters, because that's part of that plate. So make sure that you're being careful with that. It really would be best to try and drink non-caloric. So water, maybe unsweetened tea, unsweetened coffee, things like that. But avoiding the beverages and fruit juices that have the sweetened things in there. It's just one more thing you have to battle with. You can incorporate it. It might be, instead of having the high carb, high glycemic part, that may be a glass of juice. So I mean, that would be an example. I don't recommend it, but you want to look at the balance. How many carbs am I getting from that serving or whatever? Artificial sweeteners are looked at as a great alternative, and they're highly recommended all the time by diabetic nutritionists or dietitians, and they're the worst thing you can do. They cause you to gain weight, and they also, some of them cause diabetic neuropathy. Aspartame, NutraSweet, causes diabetic neuropathy. Sucralose drives your hemoglobin A1C crazy. So the artificials, even though they're calorie-free, they're not without their impact on your brain and they drive you to look for more food. You also say, gee, I had a sugar-free Coke. I'll have two hamburgers instead, because I saved calories on that end, which is, again, false. Make your food taste good. This needs to be something you can live with, something you want to do. So use different spices, get creative, take a cooking class, learn what food are, what's in them, that kind of thing. But you want to watch for the sugar that's in there that can create a problem. So again, I've mentioned exercise already. This really is a big deal. It really matters a lot. You can manage both your sugar and reduce your sugar. It can help decrease your insulin resistance, improve insulin sensitivity, helps with weight management, good for your heart, blood pressure, brain, mood, energy. It's just really a big deal. When you're getting into exercise, if you haven't been doing it, it's really important not to jump right into it. You want to do it, I recommend a 30-minute walk as a goal. So if you haven't been doing that, maybe start with a 10-minute walk, or what you can do, and do what's called an out and back walk. You walk out 5 minutes and turn around and go back. So you're not getting further away from where you need to be and, I can't get back, what am I going to do? And over time, increase the number of minutes, maybe walk out 6 minutes or 7 minutes or 8 minutes, and keep on increasing. The goal is that you want to always move forward and not have to stop because you're aching and those types of things. The goal with exercise when you're done is you feel good even though you feel tired. So that's where you want to be. If you say, oh, I feel like I shouldn't have, well, then you shouldn't have done it. You cause more harm than good. I mentioned before about checking your blood sugar before and after. It's not something you need to do regularly. It's more of an impact. It's more of an impression. What is this doing for me, and why should I keep on doing it? And this is really a good way of seeing that. So again, 30 minutes a day, and you can do whatever you want to. If you want to change it up and do walking and do some bicycling, or go to use some weights, whatever you want to do. But really, 30 minutes of good exercise every day is really very, very important for this. On the other hand of drugs, there's also supplements. I mentioned before berberine. This in clinical trials has been shown to be equally as effective as metformin in reducing insulin resistance. So measuring the blood result from being on an insulin resistance product, metformin and berberine are equal to each other, and they're actually the same number of milligrams as well. So typically with metformin, they'll put you on, maybe when you're just beginning, they'll put you on 500 milligrams twice a day. Berberine is 500 milligrams, so you'd start with one twice a day. You can take two twice a day. You can take 2-3 times a day. Very safe, no side effects, but really good effect. Glucose support is a product that has a whole variety, like about 20 different ingredients that can help with blood sugar management and regulation. A capsule or two twice a day as well, if you need to. I'd start with the berberine first and move on to the glucose support if you need that. Alpha-lipoic acid is particularly good for people with diabetic neuropathy or any kind of neuropathy. It doesn't need to be diabetic. This actually improves nerve function and can reverse. Well, hey, Agnes, how you doing? Good to see you. It helps to reverse that. So dosing is variable. If you have an issue, talk to me. This as a capsule twice a day, that would be more of a regular dose. But if somebody has neuropathy, and that would be more a prevention dose, I recommend more like 2 twice a day until you get it under control, and then you slowly taper backwards. This also regulates blood sugar. So alpha-lipoic acid has more than one function. Vitamin D3, this is involved in the nutrients for healthy insulin function. So this makes insulin healthy. So a capsule a day of a 5,000 unit is what I recommend. Magnesium is another mineral that's involved in improving insulin sensitivity. So 400 milligrams a day. In the case of AminoMag, that's 2 tablets a day, generally with meal, or it can be used at bedtime, and it helps promote healthy sleep as well. And then I mentioned earlier that fiber is a big deal when it comes to blood sugar control. Fiber slows down the rate at which sugar enters your bloodstream. Protein does that too, but fiber does that too, and it even absorbs some of the glucose in your gut. So the product I like is called Clear Fiber, using a tablespoon with each meal over time, but maybe start with 1 tablespoon and then work your way forward. You just stir it into water or any liquid, and that helps with blood sugar regulation. It also is great for regularity, bowel regularity. So you do want to be able to assess where you are. How are you doing? You don't need to go back to the doctor all the time for blood work or whatever. So things you can do are, 1, measure your weight. So what you want to do is you want to measure yourself under the same conditions every time. You don't want to have, 5 coats on one time and have nothing on the next time. You want to make sure you're weighing. So maybe first thing in the morning, before breakfast, maybe you've gone to the bathroom, and nothing on, and you weigh yourself and write it down. And then the other thing you can do is look up what's called your BMI. And what that means is if you go online, Google, and just put BMI calculator, and you put in your height and your weight. That's the only numbers they want. There's no gender. Some of them ask that. It doesn't matter because it's not used of it. Gender or age are not part of it. It's just height and weight. And it will give you a number between 18 and 25 as being normal. If you're above 25, you're considered to be overweight, and then further up, you're obese. And if you're below 18, you're underweight. So you want to make sure you try to be in the under 25 range. Now, this needs to be qualified because this is not a be-all and end-all. By the way, if you go to your doctor and they give you an after-visit summary sheet, usually your BMI will be listed on there. They'll show the way they weighed you, and they knew your height, so you'll see the BMI on there, and it'll classify you. Where are you in that category? So this is just one more tool. Again, it's not a be-all and end-all, but it is just another tool like your weight. The goal would be 0.5 pound to 1 pound per week is considered to be healthy. It can be higher than that. It mentions 1 to 2 pounds if you're obese. I find that if you incorporate intermittent fasting, it drops faster because food is inflammatory. And as you get away from the inflammation, your body's shedding water, and you may lose weight faster, but it's probably water weight, which still is good to lose. Another way is using what's called an impedance meter. This is a device that puts a mild electrical charge through your body, and the resistance measures the amount of fat you have. So they do these at gyms. You can buy them online. Some of them are incorporated into a scale. You step onto it with bare feet. Some of them have a handle you hold onto, but it'll tell you what is your percentage. The reason this would be important is that if you're increasing your exercise, you're going to be gaining muscle pounds, and that weighs something. So if you lose 5 pounds of fat, but you gain 5 pounds of muscle, you're discouraged. There's nothing there that's changed. But if you have done that, you're actually healthier than if you hadn't. It's better to have more muscle. Muscle increases your calories burned at rest. So we burn calories all the time, body heat, things like that. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn at rest. So we want more muscle. And then again, muscle helps improve insulin resistance. And certainly losing weight helps move. So an impedance meter is just one more feature that's involved in that. These are just some healthy weight ranges, again, based on the BMI. You can see, gee, I'm 5'4", 110 to 144. That's a pretty big range, but they're all within normal range. So that it's not like, oh, I've got to get down to this certain pound. It's what does your body feel good at is what you're looking for. Another thing that helps qualify what's going on is your waist circumference. When you're losing weight, typically, in a good way, your belly will get smaller. You have your hips, you have your waist, your belly will get smaller. So again, you may say, gee, my waist was 38, and now I'm 36, but my weight didn't change. Well, you gained a lot of muscle and you lost a lot of fat. So your stomach, again, my pants are looser, that kind of thing. You're getting perspective that what I'm doing is right, even though I'm not seeing a huge change in my number on my scale. So how do you measure it? You put a tape around your waist, resting at the top of your hip bones. You take a deep breath in and let it out. Have the tape measure snugly against your skin, but you don't want to tighten it, cinch it in. And again, the goal would be, and one of the markers for insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome is that for men, if your waist is 40 inches or greater, then that is one of the characteristics of insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. And for women, it's 35 inches and lower would be considered to be that range. So this gives you a little visual on how to measure that properly. Okay, then you can also measure your blood sugar. If you have diabetes, you should have a glucose meter. If you're pre-diabetic, I would also recommend you have a glucose meter so you can understand where you are. You then have it on hand to be able to measure your before and after exercise, monitor where you are, especially if you're on medications, because if you start to dip low, then you're going to get into trouble, and you need to talk to your doctor, and hopefully the doctor say, okay, hey, let's cut back on that. You've lost weight, you're exercising, you're eating right, that kind of stuff, taking supplements, that kind of thing. So if you're on meds, you really don't want to see your blood sugar go below 80. You're now getting into a severe danger zone. The other thing that's important to understand about having diabetes and having high blood sugar is that, let's just say you're normally 180, and 100 is normal. If you drop from 180 to 100 quickly, you're going to be in relative hypoglycemia. You've had an 80-point drop in your blood sugar that your body's not used to. It's used to 180 as being its normal. And now you're dropping down to, yes, it's normal, but not for you. It's not yet, it isn't. So you need to watch this, and this should not go down fast. It should be something that goes down over time. If you want to ask your doctor to measure certain things that would be more effective in helping you monitor things, generally if you're in the diabetes range, I don't know about the pre-diabetes range, they will measure hemoglobin A1C. That's that 3-month measure. I don't know how insurance goes with that, but if you can get that done, that would be very healthy to know. Again, insulin, they just don't ever measure. I've seen blood work for 25 years. I've never seen anybody bring me their labs that showed they were ever measured for insulin. And when I ask people to ask their doctor, the doctors say no. And I don't get it. But
There has to be a test available.
there is. It's right in the bloodstream. It's insulin.
Just the insulin.
Yeah. Just measure insulin. And if they say, no, we're not going to, well, why not? Well, we don't know what to do if it's high. They don't know what to do, so they don't do it. Then certainly cholesterol, they're going to measure those as well. One of the more important ones relating to blood sugar is your triglycerides. Triglycerides are like a blend of the measurement of where your cholesterol is as well as your blood sugar, kind of wrapped up into one little test. So triglycerides are a big deal. In terms of heart disease, inflammation is huge when it comes to heart disease. In fact, the studies are showing that 50+% of people who have heart attacks do not have high cholesterol. So here they're screened, they're normal, and they consider cholesterol to be a high risk for heart attacks. But over 50% don't have high cholesterol. Why? Yes, they may have clogged arteries even though their cholesterol is normal. It's because of inflammation. Inflammation allows the cholesterol to plug your arteries. If you had complete lack of inflammation, you could have a cholesterol of 400. No, they think 200 is normal. You could have 400, and there's no harm to you because you're not depositing it. It's not blocking anything up. So the HSCRP means high sensitivity C-reactive protein, and that's just a monitor of inflammation in your heart. There's another one called CRP that's general inflammation. So if you had, say, severe arthritis, you could have a high CRP, but generally you won't have a high HSCRP because one is more specific for the heart. But both would be good. So CRP and HSCRP are both good to know. Homocysteine is another inflammatory marker. Again, we're trying to reduce inflammation in the body. Homocysteine is just an amino acid that gets developed as you eat food. And if you are deficient in B12, B6, and folic acid, homocysteine levels will rise, and that can be an inflammation problem. So if you have that, those 3 vitamins can reduce that back to normal. But it's good to know you have that. So, some cautions. Diet, lifestyle, and supplements can lower your blood sugar. So that is a fact. If you're on diabetes medications, you need to be monitored. You need to work with someone on that. So even though you may not take a supplement, if you now begin to monitor your blood sugar, maybe go intermittent fasting, improve your exercise, you have to keep your doctor advised, monitor your blood sugar, and notify the doctor when your sugars go down. Because then the doctor should say, let's get off that, or let's reduce the dose, or let's reduce one or the other, that kind of thing. This is really, really, really important. Because the way it works is lifestyle can normalize your blood sugar. Drugs lower your blood sugar. You do not want to lower it lower than, I mentioned before, hypoglycemia can be a life-threatening situation. So getting below 70, 80 can be a really big deal. So anyway, so working with your doctor to make sure that everything is going well with that. You don't ever stop the diabetes drugs on your own. That should only be in conjunction with your doctor. The way I work is that if somebody's on meds, and I mentioned people that have been on them, they're going to monitor their sugar. As the sugars go down, call your doctor. Okay, let's remove that one. Okay, it's gone back down. Let's remove the doctor. The doctor does the removing, not you and not me. That needs to be done professionally with that. If you're not on diabetes meds, then you don't have to worry about it. You're not being driven down. Your blood lifestyle and all that. The only lifestyle factor that could drop it really low is intermittent fasting. If you're just not eating, yes, you could go into low blood sugar, especially if your body's not used to it. So over time, as you get used to it, it won't happen. But on the onset, you could get into trouble without that. But basically, the lifestyle, intermittent fasting, and exercise are safe for everybody who's not on that. One of the things that I do is I work with people in order to help to get this under control. And this is not a long-term process. This is generally a short-term process. So, oops, what'd I do? There we go. So we do have a new program. I do counseling. That's part of my function here, and I counsel people on any health issue from a broad perspective. What we've done is we've created a focus on blood sugar and weight loss. So if you had a million other health conditions, this would be fine for only this one issue. It doesn't deal with any other issue you're dealing with. So it involves blood sugar management, weight loss counseling. You come in and every 2 weeks, you come in and meet with me. Again, my goal is education. Like I mentioned, you should be able to eat this way without wanting to do something else. It needs to be a lifestyle that you would like, you want to live with. You don't want to go back to where you were before. So we look at goals, we set, I'm looking at your numbers, getting your doctor's labs. And so this particular program, and you have a brochure, it talks about that. It's basically a 50% discount off my regular counseling fees. So you can get a good idea looking at that. I mentioned before one guy that I work with. Here's a couple others. This is a 57-year-old woman who came to me on metformin and lisinopril for diabetes and blood pressure. After 8 months, she's off both. And these are her results. She basically went the hemoglobin A1C. And again, doctors want you 7 or lower. And usually at that point they say, gee, you're no longer diabetic or you're under good control. She went from 13, this is in 8 months, went from 13 down to 6.9. And then her weight her blood sugar went from a fasting 251 down to 106. And then this 67-year-old man was on metformin. 4 months later, hemoglobin A1C from 8.1 to 6.2. Blood sugar went from 183 to 110, and weight went from 313 to 283. So again, these are not anomalies. This is typical of what I see. I just started with a new woman, and she did not want to go on drugs, completely refused to go on drugs, and her sugars were 350. And she came back for a 2-week visit, and she was down to 280. So again, these are things that happen quickly and safely when you do this. And again, it becomes, you don't need me long term. Once you know how to balance your food, once you're exercising well, you're reaching your goals, then we don't need to see each other unless you stop doing what you're doing. So again, balancing your blood sugar, weight, and insulin are critical for good health. And I can't say that in a less emphatic way. This is your life involved here. So insulin resistance, prediabetes, and type 2 diabetes can be reversed. In my opinion, these are not diseases. These are metabolic imbalances. This is not like you have an infection that needs to be taken care of. This is created by your lifestyle. And I won't say that 100% because, again, there can be other reasons for this. But in general, if you look at our population, the numbers now are startling. 70% of American adults are either overweight or obese. And our diabetes rates are climbing. So these are induced. These are not caught, so to speak. So diet and exercise, these are huge for both issues. We do these talks monthly. Next month we're having a guest. Cynthia Hall is a doctor, a naturopathic doctor, and her specialty is in women's health. And so she's going to come and talk about perimenopause, the time between regular fertility and menopause. So anyway, she'll be here Saturday, October 14th, and you have a little newsletter that talks about that as well. Do we have any questions? Yes?
What about stevia as a sweetener?
Stevia is wonderful. Stevia is not artificial. Stevia is natural. That's from a plant. And in addition to having a sweet flavor with no calories, stevia also helps regulate blood sugar and blood pressure. In fact, we have a blood pressure supplement called BP Manager. One of the ingredients is stevia. So stevia is great. But make sure there's no other ingredient besides stevia, because there's a lot of companies that add other things to it. Stevia only.
And what about alcohol? What about like red wine, which is supposed to be good for you, but what is that?
In general, my view is if you don't drink, don't. If you do drink, limit it to maybe 1 glass a day. Glass of red wine, white wine, 1 mixed drink, whatever, one bottle of beer, that kind of thing. Generally better not to, but keep it at a minimum, but once in a while is fine. But technically 1 drink a day, studies have shown it improves heart health, things like that. But never start it if you don't drink. And by the way, the glass is only this big now. Yes?
Is stevia the only good sweetener?
You can use other sweeteners if you take them into account when you're counting your carbs. Like if you're having a little honey, that kind of thing. Say you're going to have tea with your dinner and you're going to have a teaspoon of honey. Well, those go to the carbohydrate amount in that. The ones that should never be used are the artificials. And that's the stevia, I meant to say Splenda. Splenda, NutraSweet, those kinds of products should not be used at all. Yes?
So you should stay away from like maple syrups, because recently I used to have a little bit of sugar in my coffee, 2 cups a day.
Okay.
And then I decided, well, I'm just going to try some maple syrup.
It's the same.
It's
Yeah.
what I think
Yeah.
sugar,
It's just a pure sugar, honey, maple syrup, some regular white, table sugar. They'll be the same, exact same carb impact. Yes, there's more nutrients in honey and more nutrients in syrup than there is in cane sugar. But or you have this brown unrefined sugar, a little more nutrients, but the carb impact is just as dramatic. So you'd count that as part of, like I said, a beverage has to count as part of your balance.
I've tried stevia in coffee, it just doesn't taste
You might have put in too much.
sweet at all.
Well, then what you do is get either a powder or a liquid and put in a little bit, taste it. Oh, not so much, put in a little more. If you put in too much, it'll usually often taste bitter. So working your way forward slowly, you might, I only need 3 granules or something like that. Work your way forward slowly, or 1 drop, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So, say you do add a little maple syrup, or like, I recall years ago, there was like, you wanted a 1-to-1 protein to carb balance. So the honey, amount of carbs in honey were counted toward that balance.
Towards the carb level.
But if you're doing the plate method, how do you know where honey or syrup, maple syrup fits in there?
If you wanted to be more precise with a plate, what you would do is make up your own little chart of what's in that meal. So on one side, you have every food, and then you have a column for protein and a column for carb. And you look up the numbers either on your supplement facts of the container, or go online and say, okay, how much carb is in a cup of broccoli, or how much, there's protein in broccoli too. And once you do that, you can then add down. We don't eat that many different things. So if you know how to balance that typical breakfast or that typical lunch or typical dinners that you normally have, you can do a lot on your own without having to worry about it. It becomes
One ratio, protein to carb?
the ratio on here is not 1-to-1. That's more the Mediterranean diet. When I meet with people, like with the diabetes program, I would put you on a 1-to-1 ratio temporarily until you get weight under control, blood sugar under control. Then you're allowed to change it a little bit. Again, I mentioned it needs to be satisfying long term. A little bit of bread here and there, a little bit of rice is good, but not while you're in the critical danger zone. You want to get your body out of bad, and then you can manage with that. So the 30-40, where 50-50 would be the equal levels, you can have slightly more carb than protein, but not much. So that's where that would play. But drinks or added syrups or whatever always fall into how much carbohydrate am I getting from that, because that's always going to be high concentrated sources. Like a glass of juice, or compared to a glass of water, you're going to drive your sugar crazy with a glass of juice, and with the water it does nothing. Yeah.
So, Coke Zero in plain?
Zero means artificially sweetened. And there's nothing redeeming in Coke. There is no nutritional value. It's all bad. If it's the fizzy you like, then any, like a seltzer or a tonic, the carbon dioxide is not damaging. And by the way, the other thing wrong with the carbonated soft drinks is the phosphates. They cause bone thinning. They induce osteoporosis, which is a really big deal as we age, men and women. So no Coke Zero. Anytime you taste something sweet, and it has no calories, it is almost certain that you will have an artificially sweetened product. And I've seen products with stevia and with NutraSweet in it, same product. So don't think stevia is safe. It has to be alone as a sweetener. Yeah.
So I'm going next week for my yearly checkup.
Yeah.
I want to know what to ask the doctor.
You've got the list right on your there. Yep.
So what's HbA1c?
That's the hemoglobin A1C.
They do that?
Well, I'm guessing they won't do it for you unless you've been diagnosed with diabetes.
So that's the hemoglobin?
The hemoglobin A, that's the 3-month marker of your blood sugar over time. They'll give you a number, like I gave you the list on there where they are, and along with that number, they'll usually say this equates to this blood sugar. So for instance, if you're like around a 7, your blood sugar might be like a 170. That's the calculated average glucose number. But if you're not in the diabetes or prediabetes diagnosis, then probably the insurance will deny hemoglobin A1C.
And then the insulin, the cholesterol, is that CBC?
That's a standard cholesterol. That's a standard metabolic panel, standard cholesterol panel.
And then you've got the two different tests for the
Right, correct.
and then
Homocysteine, yeah. Those are inflammatory markers. Those are good screenings for heart health.
Now, glucose, which one is that? Is that,
Glucose is your blood sugar. That's standard in every lab.
okay, so glucose, vitamin D, iron, and maybe thyroid? All those I should probably ask for.
Certainly. I mean, usually thyroid is standard. They measure TSH. Iron, it probably would be based on symptom. I don't know that they automatically, you could ask the doctor whether they, if you're tired, that kind of thing, then they would say, oh, let's check your iron. But I don't know that they do that as a standard screening.
Only if you're anemic.
Yeah. Well, how do they know you're anemic unless they check you?
Well, it's a standard CBC, so complete blood count. So they're looking at your hemoglobin, they're looking at your red blood cell count. If those are low, that's when they check you for something like iron deficiency.
No, they checked my iron because I was anemic.
Okay, so they're doing it automatically.
They will,
Yeah.
the last word.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Well, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Hope you learned something about this, but if you have any questions, I'm here to answer any.